The twin suns of Skorzar-9 beat down mercilessly on the Federation research vessel as it descended through the planet's thin atmosphere. Logan Pierce wiped beads of sweat from his brow, his eyes fixed on the endless red dunes stretching to the horizon. As the ship's only human crew member and survival specialist, he'd spent the journey studying the preliminary scans of this uncharted world, a desert planet with surface temperatures exceeding 50 degrees Celsius during daylight hours and plummeting to freezing at night. Final approach," announced Commander Vaucour, his scaled fingers dancing across the control panel. The Draconian's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the recycled air with obvious distaste. "Pierce, status report on landing zone viability." Logan nodded, his weathered hands gripping a worn leather notebook, an anachronism amid the ship's sleek technology. "LZ appears stable. Sand composition seems to support our weight, but I recommend deploying the extended landing struts to distribute pressure." Vaucour's reptilian eyes narrowed. "Your primitive observations are noted, but our sensors indicate perfect structural integrity." His dismissive tone made it clear what he thought of having a human aboard, a Federation requirement he'd protested vigorously. The vessel shuddered as it touched down, sending vibrations through the deck plates. Behind Logan, the Telnari engineer Mara clicked her mandibles with concern. Her iridescent exoskeleton reflected the red warning lights that suddenly flashed across the command console. "Power fluctuation detected," she chittered, six-fingered hands moving with inhuman speed across her station. "Localized magnetic anomaly, stronger than predicted." Logan glanced at the Younger twins, Cran and Soru, their translucent bodies pulsing with anxiety as they monitored the environmental systems. Their species' ability to process and display data through color changes in their skin made them valuable scientists. But their water requirements were the highest of any crew member. "Atmospheric processors coming online," Soru announced, her body flickering between shades of blue. "Beginning water synthesis sequence." The mission was straightforward in theory. Establish a research outpost on Skorzar-9 to study its unique mineral composition and determine its viability for Federation mining operations. The ship carried state-of-the-art equipment, including atmospheric water synthesizers, designed to extract the minimal moisture from the desert air and supplement it through molecular recombination. Logan tucked his notebook into his breast pocket and moved toward the equipment bay. Unlike his alien colleagues, he didn't fully trust technology, especially on an uncharted world. His position on the mission had been controversial. Many Federation officials considered human survival techniques obsolete, but regulations still required at least one specialist trained in manual resource acquisition on any expedition to an extreme environment. The landing ramp extended with a pneumatic hiss, and scorching air rushed into the vessel. Logan squinted against the blinding light of the twin suns, raising a hand to shield his eyes. The landscape was even more desolate than the scans had suggested. Endless dunes of rust-colored sand, punctuated by jagged rock formations that resembled the vertebrae of some colossal creature. "Initial readings show surface temperature at 53 degrees Celsius," reported Cran, his body shifting to a deep orange. "Atmospheric moisture at 0.03%, barely detectable." Logan felt a prickle of unease. "That's significantly lower than our initial data suggested." Commander Vaucour strode down the ramp, his scaled skin seeming to drink in the heat. "The synthesizers are calibrated for conditions 10 times more severe. Begin unloading the equipment and establish the perimeter." Over the next 4 hours, the team worked to set up their base camp. Thermal shields deployed around the vessel, creating a pocket of relatively cooler air. Solar collectors unfurled like massive flowers, turning toward the twin suns, gathering energy to power their systems. The Yangar twins set up the atmospheric processors, sleek silver towers designed to pull moisture from the air and create potable water. Logan helped where needed, but also took time to explore the immediate surroundings, collecting soil samples and making notes in his leather-bound book. He'd learned long ago that understanding a planet's natural systems could mean the difference between survival and death. As the second sun began to set, casting long purple shadows across the dunes, Logan returned to find the camp in disarray. Mara was frantically disassembling one of the atmospheric processors, while Commander Voker loomed over her. His scaled skin flushed dark with anger. "What's happening?" Logan asked, approaching the group. Saru turned toward him, her translucent body pulsing with anxious red patterns. "The water synthesizers aren't functioning. All 3 units are failing to produce output." Logan felt his stomach tighten. Water was the most critical resource on a desert planet, more important than oxygen, which their suits could generate, or food, which they had in ample supply. "The molecular recombination chambers are offline," Mara explained, frustration evident in her clicking mandibles. "There appears to be an electromagnetic interference pattern we didn't detect in our initial scans. It's disrupting the synthesizer's quantum field." Commander Vokur turned his reptilian gaze to Logan. "Your human observations failed to note this anomaly." Logan ignored the accusation. "How much water do we have in reserve?" Cran's body dimmed to a worried purple. Standard mission protocols called for minimal reserves, since the synthesizers were supposed to begin production immediately. "We have approximately 3 days' supply at rationed levels." Logan did the calculations quickly. Their pickup wasn't scheduled for 14 days. The Federation wouldn't begin to worry about them for at least a week after that. They were facing a critical situation. "Can the synthesizers be repaired?" he asked Mara. The Telnari engineer's antennae drooped. "I can attempt modifications, but the interference is pervasive. I've never encountered anything like it." As night fell, the temperature plummeted with alarming speed. The crew gathered in the ship's command center to assess their options. Logan could see the first signs of dehydration in the Yangar twins. Their normally luminescent bodies had dulled, and their movements were becoming sluggish. "We should send a distress signal and await rescue," Saru suggested, her voice weaker than usual. Commander Voker shook his head. "Negative. The nearest Federation vessel is 6 days away at maximum speed. By the time they receive our signal and respond, our water supplies will be depleted." "We could attempt to reach the mountains to the east," Mara suggested, projecting a holographic map. "The elevated terrain might have different atmospheric conditions." Logan studied the map, noting the distance. "That's over 100 kilometers across open desert. Without water, we wouldn't make it a quarter of that distance." The tension in the room was palpable. Logan could see the fear in his colleague's eyes. Even Voker's reptilian stoicism was cracking. Dehydration would affect each species differently, but the outcome would be the same: death. Logan pulled out his notebook and flipped through the pages. "There might be another way," he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. "Human history is full of desert survival techniques. Before we had molecular recombinators, we used solar stills to extract water from seemingly dry environments." He sketched a simple diagram on a blank page. "We dig a hole in the ground, place a container at the bottom, cover the hole with a transparent sheet weighted in the center, and the sun does the rest. Water evaporates from the soil, condenses on the underside of the sheet, and drips into the container." Commander Vokur's laugh was harsh. "Primitive superstition. There is no detectable moisture in the soil." "There's always some moisture," Logan insisted. "Plants, insects, soil, they all contain water. And at night, when the temperature drops, moisture condenses from the air." Mara clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "The principle is sound, but the yield would be minimal." "Minimal is better than nothing," Logan countered. "And we can build multiple stills to increase production." The commander's tail lashed in agitation. "While you play in the sand, Engineer Mara will continue attempting to repair the synthesizers. That is our priority." Logan knew better than to argue further. He could see in Voker's eyes that the Draconian was operating from a place of fear now. clinging to the technology he understood, rather than embracing unfamiliar methods. That night, after the others had retreated to their quarters to conserve energy, Logan slipped out of the ship. The temperature had dropped to near freezing, and the stars blazed overhead with an intensity he'd never seen on Earth. He gathered discarded packing materials, sheets of clear thermoplastic that had protected delicate equipment during transport, and other supplies he would need. By the light of Scorzar 9's 3 moons, Logan dug a shallow pit in the sand about a meter in diameter. At the bottom, he placed a small collection vessel, fashioned from a food container. Next, he laid the thermoplastic sheet over the hole, securing the edges with sand and stones. Finally, he placed a small weight in the center of the sheet, creating a shallow cone that pointed down toward the collection vessel. It was a crude solar still, but it followed the same principles humans had used for centuries to survive in Earth's harshest deserts. Logan built 3 more before returning to the ship, exhausted but hopeful. Morning brought renewed crisis. Cran had collapsed, his translucent body barely pulsing with life. The Yangar physiology required more water than any other species aboard, and dehydration was already taking its toll. His cellular integrity is failing, Soru explained, her own body dimming with distress as she tended to her twin. Without proper hydration, our membranes begin to break down. Commander Vokur paced the medical bay, his scaled skin shedding dust with each movement, a sign of dehydration in his species. Engineer Mara, status report on the synthesizers. Mara's mandibles clicked in frustration. No progress, Commander. The interference pattern is shifting, adapting each time I attempt to compensate. Logan checked his water ration. Less than 100 milliliters remained for the day. He drank half and offered the rest to Soru. For your brother, he said quietly. The Yangar's colors swirled with gratitude as she accepted the precious liquid. I need to check something outside, Logan announced, heading for the airlock before Vokur could object. The twin suns were already high in the sky, the temperature climbing toward unbearable. Logan trudged through the sand toward his hidden solar stills, his heart pounding with hope and fear. If they had failed. He wasn't sure what option remained. He approached the first still and carefully lifted the edge of the thermoplastic sheet. At the bottom of the collection vessel, a small pool of water glistened, perhaps 50 milliliters. It wasn't much, but multiplied by 4 stills. It might be enough to keep Cran alive for another day. Logan collected the water in a sterile container and checked the other stills. Together, they had produced just over 200 milliliters, a miracle of physics and perseverance. He hurried back to the ship, the precious liquid clutched against his chest. In the medical bay, Soru looked up as Logan entered. Her colors had dimmed further, and Cran lay motionless on the examination table. I have water, Logan announced, holding up the container. Commander Vokur whirled around, his eyes narrowing. Where did you obtain this? Solar stills, Logan explained, moving to Cran's side and carefully administering a few drops to the Yangar's parched membrane. It's not much, but it's clean and it might help. Soru's body pulsed with cautious hope as her brother's colors briefly intensified in response to the moisture. This is barely enough to matter, Vokur scoffed. But Logan noticed the commander watching intently as Cran showed signs of improvement. It's 4 times what we produced with technology today, Logan pointed out. And I can build more stills, improve their efficiency. Mara approached, her compound eyes studying the water with scientific curiosity. The principle is elegant in its simplicity. Perhaps we could incorporate elements of this design into a larger system. For the first time, Logan felt a shift in the crew's attitude toward his primitive methods. Even Vokur seemed less dismissive, though the commander quickly returned to discussing rescue options. Over the next 2 days, Logan and Mara worked together to expand the solar still network, using materials salvaged from non-essential equipment, They constructed 20 stills of various designs, experimenting with depth, covering materials, and collection methods. The Telnari engineers' technical expertise complemented Logan's practical knowledge, and together, they managed to increase water production to nearly a liter per day. It wasn't enough for comfort, but it was enough to survive. Cran's condition stabilized, though he remained weak. The entire crew was on minimal rations, conserving energy by limiting movement and staying in the cooler sections of the ship during peak heat hours. On the 5th day, disaster struck again. Mara detected a massive electromagnetic storm approaching from the west, far larger than anything their instruments had previously registered. "The storm will disable all electronic systems," she explained, projecting a simulation for the crew. "Based on its magnitude, we can expect a complete shutdown of the ship's power systems for at least 48 hours. Commander Vokur's tail lashed with agitation. "Without climate control, the internal temperature will quickly match the external environment. During the day, it will become unsurvivable." Logan studied the holographic map, his mind racing. "There's a formation to the northeast, twin spires of rock approximately 23 kilometers from our position. The scans show cave systems that could provide natural shelter from both the heat and the electromagnetic radiation. 23 kilometers across open desert." Vokur shook his head. "Impossible. The Yangar would never survive the journey." "We can travel at night," Logan suggested. "The temperature drops to manageable levels, and we can carry the solar stills with us to set up at rest points." A heated debate ensued. But as the storm's leading edge approached and instruments began to fail, the decision was made for them. They would have to abandon the ship and make for the twin spires. Preparation was frantic. Logan and Mara modified the solar stills for transport, while Soru constructed a stretcher for Cran from lightweight materials. Commander Vokur grudgingly helped gather essential supplies, though he continued to voice his skepticism about their chances. As the first sun set, leaving only its twin still blazing on the horizon, the crew emerged from the ship. Each member carried a pack with their water ration and assigned equipment. Logan had a printed map and compass, analog tools that would function regardless of the electromagnetic interference. "Stay close together," Logan instructed as they began their trek. "The temperature will continue to drop for the next few hours, so we need to cover as much distance as possible before dawn." The journey was grueling. The sand shifted treacherously underfoot, and despite the falling temperature, exertion quickly had them all sweating. Losing precious moisture, they couldn't afford to spare. The Yangar twins struggled the most, with Soru supporting Cran as his condition deteriorated again. By midnight, they had covered nearly 8 kilometers. Logan called a halt in the lee of a large dune, setting up several solar stills to capture whatever night moisture they could. "We rest for 2 hours," he announced. "Then we continue before the sun's rise." Commander Vokur collapsed onto the sand, his normally imposing frame looking diminished. "This plan is madness," he hissed. "We should have remained with the ship." "The ship would have become an oven by midday," Logan reminded him. "At least here we have a chance." Mara busied herself checking the still designs, her methodical nature finding comfort in the task. "The temperature differential between the sand and air is creating condensation. We should have some water within the hour." Logan smiled wearily at the Telnari engineer. Over the past days, they had developed a mutual respect that transcended their biological differences. Where he saw practical solutions, she saw scientific principles, and together they had created something neither could have managed alone. The night's yield from the stills was better than expected, almost half a liter, and it was shared among the crew with Cran receiving the largest portion. His condition improved enough for them to continue their journey, as the first hints of dawn colored the eastern sky. By mid-morning, the heat had become oppressive. The twin suns blazed overhead, and the temperature soared past 55 degrees. Every step became an act of will. They had covered another 7 kilometers, but the pace was slowing dramatically. There, Logan pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. We can shelter there during peak heat and continue this evening. The small cave in the rock formation provided blessed relief from the direct sunlight, though the air remained stiflingly hot. Logan set up more solar stills around the entrance, positioning them to catch the day's heat while remaining accessible from their shaded sanctuary. Commander Vokor slumped against the cave wall, his scaled skin flaking alarmingly. "How much farther?" he rasped. Logan consulted his map. "About 8 kilometers. We should be able to see the spires when we crest the next major dune system." Saru cradled her brother's head in her lap, her own body barely glowing now. "He won't survive another day like this," she whispered. Logan knew she was right. Despite their best efforts, they were losing the battle against dehydration. The solar stills were producing water, but not quickly enough to offset what they were losing through exertion and evaporation. Mara chittered softly, a sound Logan had come to recognize as her thinking noise. "The twin spires, they are significantly taller than the surrounding terrain." "Yes?" Logan nodded. "According to the scans, they rise about 100 meters above the desert floor. Then, they will create their own microclimate," the engineer explained, her antennae quivering with excitement. "The temperature differential between sun and shade will generate air movement. Where there is air movement over varied terrain, there is often increased condensation." Hope flickered in Logan's chest. "You think there might be more moisture near the spires?" "It is a scientific probability," Mara confirmed. "Not certainty, but probability." It was enough to renew their determination. As the second sun began its descent, they collected the meager water from the stills, barely enough to wet each of their mouths, and continued their journey. The trek through the night was a nightmare of exhaustion and disorientation. Twice they had to stop while Saru tended to Cran, whose membrane had begun to tear in places from severe dehydration. Commander Vokor moved like an automaton, his once sharp eyes glazed with fatigue. Even Mara's methodical movements had become erratic, her exoskeleton clicking dryly with each step. Logan kept them moving through sheer force of will, consulting his compass and map by the light of the 3 moons. His own body screamed for water, his lips cracked and bleeding, but he pushed the pain aside. As the leader of this desperate march, he couldn't afford to show weakness. Dawn broke as they crested a massive dune, and there on the horizon stood the twin spires, 2 needle-like formations of dark rock reaching toward the sky. They were still several kilometers away, but the sight gave them renewed energy. "We can make it before midday if we push hard," Logan encouraged them. "Then we'll have shelter from the worst heat." The final stretch was the most difficult. As the suns climbed higher, the sand became hot enough to burn through their footwear. Every breath felt like inhaling fire. Cran had lapsed into unconsciousness, and Saru and Vokor now carried his stretcher between them, their movements sluggish and uncoordinated. When they finally reached the base of the spires, it was like entering another world. The massive rock formations created deep shadows, and the temperature dropped noticeably in their shelter. As Mara had predicted, a constant breeze flowed between the spires, created by the differential heating of the rocks. Logan immediately set to work establishing their camp in a recessed area between the spires, where a natural cave opening promised even greater shelter. He and Mara deployed all their remaining solar stills in strategic locations, where the breeze and temperature differential would maximize condensation. The results exceeded their wildest hopes. Within hours, the first still had collected nearly 100 milliliters of water, more than twice the rate they'd achieved at their previous locations. By nightfall, they had almost 2 liters of precious liquid. "The water is saving us," Saru observed, as she carefully administered drops to her brother, whose color was gradually intensifying. "But we are still stranded. The electromagnetic storm will have disabled our communications." Commander Vokor looking somewhat recovered after receiving his water ration, nodded grimly. Even if the storm passes, we have no way to signal our position to any rescue vessels. Logan had been considering this problem. He emerged from the cave and studied the twin spires thoughtfully. We might not have electronics, but we have physics, he said. That night, Logan and Mara climbed to the top of the shorter spire. It was a treacherous ascent in the darkness, but they managed it by working together, finding handholds in the rough stone. At the summit, they constructed a signal device using reflective thermal blankets stretched across a frame of lightweight struts salvaged from their packs. When the suns rise, this will reflect light in all directions, Logan explained. Like a beacon. Mara clicked her mandibles appreciatively. And, to enhance the effect, we can create smoke from burning small amounts of the waterproof packing material. The combination of reflection and smoke will be visible for many kilometers. They descended carefully and rejoined the others in the cave. The night's still production had yielded another liter of water, which was carefully rationed among the crew. Cran was conscious again, though weak, and Soru's colors had brightened considerably. As dawn approached, Logan and Voker climbed the spire to ignite the signal. The commander had been unusually quiet, his earlier antagonism replaced by a thoughtful reserve. I misjudged you, human, Voker said as they reached the summit. Your primitive methods saved my crew when our technology failed. Logan smiled tiredly. Not primitive, fundamental. The laws of physics don't change, whether you're using a quantum recombinator or a solar still. Water evaporates and condenses. Light reflects. Fire creates smoke. Voker's scaled hand rested briefly on Logan's shoulder, an unprecedented gesture from the Draconian. My people have a saying, the tallest tower is built on stone, not sand. We became so enamored with our towers that we forgot about the stone. They ignited the signal as the first sun crested the horizon. The reflective material blazed like a miniature star atop the spire, and coils of dark smoke spiraled into the cloudless sky. Now, all they could do was wait and hope. Hours passed with no sign of rescue. The crew continued to tend the solar stills, which were now producing enough water to meet their minimal needs. Logan estimated they could survive indefinitely in the shelter of the spires, though their food supplies would eventually run low. On the afternoon of the third day, as Logan was checking the stills, Soru emerged from the cave, her body pulsing with excitement. Movement, she called, pointing to the western sky. Something is approaching! They gathered at the cave entrance, shielding their eyes against the glare. A dark speck was visible against the blue, growing larger by the moment. Soon, they could make out the distinctive shape of a Federation patrol vessel, its sleek hull reflecting the sunlight as it descended toward their position. Relief washed over the crew. They had survived against impossible odds, using nothing more than basic principles of physics and the determination to live. As the patrol vessel landed in a swirl of sand, Logan felt Commander Voker's presence beside him. The Draconian's eyes were fixed on the approaching rescue team. When we return to the Federation, Voker said quietly, I will recommend that your human methods be included in all survival training. Technology can fail, but nature's laws are constant. Logan nodded, too exhausted for words but deeply moved by the commander's transformation. They had arrived on Skorzar 9 as disparate beings united only by their mission. They would leave as a team who had learned to value each other's strengths and overcome their differences in the face of adversity. The rescue team reached them, offering water and medical assistance. As Logan accepted a drink from a concerned medic, he caught Mara's compound eyes, watching him. The Telnari engineer's antennae dipped in a gesture of respect. Water from air, she chittered softly. Such a simple miracle. Indeed it was, Logan thought. The simplest miracles were often the most profound, like the miracle of different species learning to work together, to see beyond their prejudices and preconceptions. Like drops of water condensing from seemingly empty air, understanding had formed between them, drop by precious drop. As they boarded the rescue vessel, Logan took one last look at the solar stills scattered around the base of the twin spires. Those simple constructions of plastic and container had done what the most advanced Federation technology could not. They had kept life flowing in the harshest of environments. The patrol vessel rose from the surface of Skorzar 9, leaving behind the red sands and scorching heat. But they carried something with them that hadn't been there when they arrived. A newfound respect for the fundamental laws that governed all existence, regardless of species or technology level. Commander Vokur stood at the viewport, watching the desert planet recede below them. "Your notebook," he said, turning to Logan. "What other secrets does it contain?" Logan smiled and patted his breast pocket where the leather-bound book rested. "No secrets, Commander. Just reminders of where we came from and what we've learned along the way." The Yangar twins, huddled together in recovery pods, pulsed with colors of contentment and gratitude. Mara was already discussing with the patrol vessel's engineer how to modify their equipment to function in Skorzar 9's unusual electromagnetic environment, her scientific mind never at rest. And Logan Pierce, human survival specialist, felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had not only kept his crew alive, but had also bridged the gap between advanced technology and fundamental principles, between different species and their approaches to the universe. As the ship accelerated toward the stars, Logan knew that the real achievement of their mission had nothing to do with mineral surveys or research outposts. It was the water they had found, not just in the solar stills, but in the connections they had formed with each other, drop by precious drop in the desert of their differences.